All right, we'll go ahead and get started with Bud Black here. We'll start off with Tracy Ringlesby. Tracy, go ahead.
Buddy, in looking at the schedule, you have like 2 off days in the first week, and then you have 1 in the next 39 days. Does that catch you by surprise at all, or is that good considering you're still building up your pitching staff?
That will test you a little bit, won't it? In August, that'll be a tester. I think, early in the year or early in the season, it will allow us, to potentially, to your point, be able to build some arm strength or keep it fresher, right? Because of the off days. I think we have an off day prior to the season. Then there's an off day before Oakland and an off day before our home opener. So, we'll be able to keep guys fresh or maybe even keep one less arm. I mean, we'll discuss that, but, August will be a challenge for, the entire team, playing with just one off day through August. And, that can be good or bad. If you're playing well, pitching well, hitting the ball, I mean, you want to keep playing. So that could be a good thing. So it could work either way. It all depends on how you're playing. Tough to answer, but I think initially it's sort of a good thing, I think, to have a couple of days off because it does freshen up the players. But then again, when you get into the meat of that schedule in August, that will test our physicalness and our arms a little bit too.
Thank you.
Thomas Harding.
Good morning, buddy. Hey, from a perspective of where you're going, is it a little nerve-wracking to go to Texas first? I know they're going through a lot of things with the virus, and then Oakland, or did you think, hey, no matter what, it was going to be tough? We're traveling is going to be its own thing.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's any difference on where you go, Thomas. I think it's all part of how you handle it as a team and individually. So as far as, going down to Texas, that for me, that's the same as going anywhere in the country.
And how about with the taxi squad? Is that going to be kind of a big decision? Who's on that taxi squad, especially when you get to that big meat of the schedule where you don't have many off days?
By the taxi squad, I assume you mean the bigger group of players that will be working out outside of Denver, as opposed to the extra 3-man.
Well, I was thinking the extra 3-man actually.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Okay.
Activate, scratch. Yeah.
Yeah. I refer to those 3 extra guys who travel with the team as the taxi squad.
Okay.
And I refer to the bigger group of 20-odd players as our satellite group. So that's just me. That's how I and the coaches are talking about this. So, okay, go back to your question.
I'm wondering that taxi squad of guys.
Yeah. One of them has to be a catcher.
Okay.
Okay.
And do you think arms for that group, or maybe bats that could spell a guy or two who's playing every day?
Well, no, that guy's got to, go right on the roster. You just can't just interchange guys on the taxi squad. I mean, you have to make a roster move to activate one of those fellas.
Okay. I thought it was like scratches in hockey where you could just bring a guy in on a game, which maybe they should be doing anyway.
Well, that's where your hockey acumen comes into play, Thomas. You're always thinking hockey. I think you're always thinking hockey and Canadian football. I think those two things are at the top of your list.
The end of the season is on the road, but without fans in the stands, who knows if it's going to be the same being on the road as normal. When you looked at that, was that one of the things that caught you? Hey,
that didn't. No. Thomas, we play 60 games. All of us in the room, have played home games, road games, night games, day games, games in the heat, games in the probably not too many games in the cold, but rain delays, windy. We're conditioned for it all. So that part doesn't bother me.
Thanks, buddy.
Patrick Saunders, go ahead.
Good morning, buddy.
Morning.
The logistics of this particular summer camp, as everyone is calling it, a little bit different than anything you guys have had to deal with before. I'm just curious, can you sketch out for us just a little bit who was in charge of getting the logistics of this camp and working out at Metro and making sure you got all your bases covered, so to speak, in this particular time?
Well, I think it was a collective effort, but, behind the scenes, Jeff, Zach Rosenthal, Zach Wilson, John Weil, Kevin Kahn, so many people are involved in just the planning of being able to, function, here at Coors Field with all the things that go into, beyond the field, right? I mean, security, you need personnel, you need, people around the ballpark to do their part to allow us to practice, the grounds crew, all the organizing of the staff is a huge project. And leading up to this, a lot of hours were spent upstairs, getting this whole thing organized. Obviously, as far as the work on the field, Mike Redmond and the coaches and I, along with, Keith and his training staff and the strength guys, all collaborated in making this schedule and making this work. A lot of it is taking off somewhat of a template from Scottsdale, but with only one field or plus Metro State, we're making that work. So, but there was a lot of conversations, a lot of discussions, a lot of planning from a lot of people. So I commend everybody who's done their part to make this, run rather seamless so far. It's been great. I think the players have been, extremely happy about how it's going so far and the work they're getting in and how this is working. And not to mention, the people on the medical side who have to do, their work as far as the testing protocols, here in the morning and, those people from the CDC and the labs who are, coordinating our vials and our tests and shipping them out. So there's a lot of moving parts in this, and I can say I'm extremely, proud of how it's all been pulled off so far.
Thanks. Baseball question. Carlos Estevez, he's always seemed to be, in my opinion, on the cusp of taking that next step, be it problems with pitch command and then injury, whatever. He certainly started to look like he's getting there toward the end of last season. What are your thoughts about his maturation and where he is right now in his career?
I totally agree. I think, when I got here, he was coming off a year in 16 where you saw some really good things, right? You saw some saves. He was put into the, ninth inning. And then the 17 and 18, a little up and down, but some bright spots. And there were some things that he needed to clean up and, self-admitted that he needed to do, as far as controlling the running game and, getting more consistent with his delivery so he could, make more consistent pitches. He's done that. And I think last year he put it all together, especially I thought the second half, from, on the roster the whole year, the number of appearances that he had, tells me he's a big league durable reliever who can be available a lot during the course of a season. And I think mentally and emotionally, a big step last year. So, I foresee big things from Carlos in the future. He's got good stuff. He's got a big arm. Our conversations are about the right things now. It's just basically about pitching and not other things. So he's in a really, really good spot for us. And, what Oberg did, what Hyro did, what we think on a couple other fellows who can bounce back, and a couple other guys who I think are getting to that stage, Almonte and a couple other guys. We have some expectations for our bullpen, but Carlos is right up at the top of that as an integral part of that group.
Excellent. Thanks, buddy.
Nick Groke.
Yeah, buddy, we knew the schedule was going to be wild, so I'm sure you've been able to at least think about the possibilities for a little bit. But now that it's real and you've seen it, are there things in your toolkit as a manager to help navigate some of the difficult stretches? Or, I mean, is roster construction going to be a more critical part of it, kind of going through, especially going through?
Yeah, I think, when you look at the first, we always got to keep in mind, how the roster is going to shift, right, from 30 to 28 to 26. It's hard to make, any, blanket hard statements about the roster because, once we start on the 24th, things change almost, things can change daily. But we know that we have to be nimble. We have to be malleable. We have to be, very cognizant of performance and how guys, we think are trending. And we have to make, we're going to have to make decisions that, you might not have to make over a 6-month season. Again, I think the early part that was mentioned earlier about a couple of the early off days, we might only need 4 starting pitchers, to get through those first, 10 games or so. That's one thing to look at. Or, we might, give guys extra rest and go with 5 guys. We're not sure. We'll talk about that. But, I think through all this, there have been stretches before of 14, 15 games in a row in other seasons. This is a little different because, guys aren't conditioned how they normally are. But I'll say this, our position players are working extremely hard to that end to be ready to play a lot of games and to play 9 innings, the guys that we project to be on the team. But with that, there's going to have to be a rest component, through this for sure to some extent. We talked about it a couple of days ago. The DH allows us on the position player side to do some things with our position players that will help. The whole day game after night game, keeping guys fresh, giving, some of our bench players at bats is going to be in play as well. So, it's really hard to predict, how this is all going to happen until we get there. And I'm sure we'll talk about it starting July 25th.
Awesome. Separately, real fast, can you update us on I hope I didn't miss this, the 3 players you were still waiting for? Was it Hyro and Antonio and Elias?
Yeah. Antonio Santos, he's here. He threw a bullpen 2 days ago. He threw the ball great. He looks good. Hyro and Elias are still following up on some protocol, and same with Charlie. Charlie's being patient, waiting for his situation to resolve. So, but Hyro and Elias are here in Denver, and they're nearing completing what they need to complete as far as the MLB protocols, and hopefully they'll be on the field, maybe as early as tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Kyle Newman.
Yeah, I know you had said you're really confident in the testing logistics and everything going on with the Rockies, but I'm sure you saw several teams didn't hold workouts yesterday because of testing holdups and just kind of other hiccups. The lack of uniform, I guess, execution early on here in summer camp across Major League Baseball, the early, criticisms from some of your fellow managers of the process, does that worry you or concern you at all?
I don't think so, because I do think they'll straighten things out. It's unfortunate that it happened for sure to, a couple clubs, and I would, I'd be bummed if it happened to us on on a given day that we were hoping to get on the field and couldn't. So, but I think in the short term, I think things will get figured out rather quickly. I do know this, that, the people in charge of these things are working awful hard to make it smooth and relatively easy. And in our case, and I think in most of the teams, from what I've gathered, and again, I'm not reading up on all 30 teams about their testing. I think things have gone pretty well. And I can speak for us, it's gone pretty well. But, back to your original point, it's unfortunate that happened, but I think that is going to be rectified rather quickly.
And quick follow-up to that. So some of the complaints were not just about the testing results getting delayed, but the amount of times players and coaches have been tested and that they hadn't been tested enough per protocol. How many times have you been tested since Rockies summer camp started?
When was, are you counting Saturday as our official day?
Yeah, so I guess since Saturday?
Twice.
Twice? Okay, and did it take
So
like
what's today?
14 hours?
Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Yeah, twice.
And then 48 hours to get those results back, or?
Yes, ours have come back quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Rod Mackey, go ahead.
Yeah, buddy. I know you and Jeff both at the very first Zoom call we had. You said hopeful things work out. You're going to stay positive. Every time we get to the start of summer camp, the schedule coming out, do you kind of gain confidence and does your excitement grow as these things fall into place and it looks more and more likely that everything's going to fall into place?
Again, I've been optimistic, the whole time. It's good to see that, teams are back on the field, teams are practicing, we have a schedule. I just know amongst our group, and I'm saying everybody down here, in the clubhouse level and even talking with our front office, everybody's encouraged by what's happened across baseball and, obviously encouraged by what's happening here in Denver. So that does lend itself to optimism, how this is going. And I think everybody knew there was probably going to be some hiccups, whether it was with some the testing or logistics of certain players getting to certain spots. I mean, that happens in a regular spring training. And now you add this component, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But, I think there's a tremendous amount of troubleshooting going on an hourly basis around the clock in a number of areas. Because a lot of people are working really, really hard to get this done and make this work. And that's always a good thing when the work is being put in to accomplish something.
Kevin Henry.
Hey, buddy, thanks for the time. Those two exhibition games in Texas, will they take on any additional significance knowing they're the only two against another opponent before the season begins? And knowing that the 30-man roster, I believe, doesn't have to be turned in until the actual opening day.
Yeah, I think so, Kevin, for sure. I think, during a regular spring training, players are used to roughly a 30-game schedule. Do all players plan all 30 games? No, but you have a buildup of at-bats and innings, and you can really sort of gauge where you are through, a full month of games. This is different. I mean, we really won't know. So I think the players will have a really extreme heightened awareness in those couple games. And I think from a roster decision, we'll see how those play out, crossing fingers, knocking on wood that, nobody's banged up there at the end and we can make decisions based on everybody's good health and how guys are playing. But I think the intensity that those games are going to bring, will be, maybe a little more heightened than the last couple games of a regular spring training schedule.
Thanks, buddy.
Barry Bloom. Barry, go ahead.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
Hi, Barry.
So, two questions. Considering the fact that how irregular corona testing has been for just normal people all around the country. I mean, Arizona, in the last week, people have been waiting online for 18 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours just to get a test in their cars. It's not surprising that there would be some irregularities in the testing program with MLB, considering the fact that my understanding is you're funneling tests to a Utah lab that usually does your drug tests and is not usually equipped for this.
Well, no, I agree. I think there's, like I mentioned earlier, I think it's, if anybody thought that this was going to go easy at the start, there's probably not many people in that camp. But you're right. There's a lot of, amongst, our group, our baseball industry. Salt Lake City has been, a part of this now for a couple of years, and I think they were, seemingly ready for, all these tests to come in, and there's bound to be some, hiccups there, and some roadblocks that might, get in the way of certain things. But again, I think they meaning the testing center there in Salt Lake, MLB, the Players Union. I think everybody's trying to do everything they can to, smooth this out. And I think maybe you guys can tell me, did I read somewhere that, there might be another testing center in play or possibly happening?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I thought I read that yesterday at some point, that there might be another lab that comes into play to help offset some of the work in Salt Lake City. But the irregularities are bound to happen. But I know that, again, it goes back to MLB, the union, players. Everybody's committed to try to make this work, and even the lab in Salt Lake City. So again, you get a bunch of people trying to get something done, who are intelligent and have the thoughts in the right spot. I think it can happen. Again, for us, and I think the majority of clubs, things have went pretty well. Now, there's been a couple teams that have ran into a difficulty. I'm not sure why. I haven't read extensively why that happened, but I'm sure they sort of figured that out, and they're probably going to try to correct it.
And then, considering the preparations for just a normal season, which you started back during the winter, and obviously it got abruptly stopped in March. And now you've had the startup, you have, Charlie, you've got all these things going on, the health and safety protocols, a 60-game season. Do you look at this? How do you look at this differently in terms of getting through it? Do you say, let's get through this the best we can and hope to win on the other side? Or do you look at it in terms of, I'm going to put a mindset on it as a manager that this is a regular season and I'm going out to win?
Yeah, I mean, for us and me personally and the coaching staff, we've talked about this, and the players. I mean, we're treating this as a regular season. We're treating this with the mindset to come out and win games, get in the playoffs, win our division, all those things that we think about all the time during a regular season. We're not treating it any differently. And our guys, from our conversations, have been great that way. They've been, locked in on the right things. I'm not hearing a lot of, side discussions about, things that are taking them away from the focus of playing. Realistically, I'm sure guys are talking about it. We're all talking about it. It's part of what's happening in the country. It's part of what's happening in our, in our world, in the baseball world. But, the main focus has been baseball. So, I'm excited about that for our guys, and I'm proud of our guys to, where their mind is. But, at the end of all this, when we look back, if we do get through this, we get through spring and we get through a season, and a champion is crowned, we're going to talk about the 2020 season. There's going to be a champion. There are going to be playoffs. It's going to be documented. But there's also going to be talk about what we went through. But, the Rockies, and this is from, Dick on down, we're treating this as close to a regular season as possible.
Well, thanks a lot, and stay healthy and safe, not only you, but all of you.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks, Barry. Tracy, go ahead, and then we have time for a couple more. Tracy? All right, we'll go ahead and
Buddy,
skip it. Tracy, go ahead.
One of the questions I had is with the way the schedule is in the first week or so, could you double up your starters just to keep them active, and that saves you from maybe needing a long man or whatever?
We're going to try to win every game, Tracy. I think we're not just going to give a guy work just to give him work. We got to make sure that we're going to put the guy in the game that we feel gives us the best chance to get outs and get us through innings with a 0 on the board. But we're not going to. The game will. I think, Tracy, the game will dictate how we use our bullpen and how we use our pitching. And we'll know more about that when we get closer to the 24th based on what happens here the next 2 weeks as far as buildup of pitch counts and so forth. But when that game starts on the 24th, and we'll probably name a opening day starter here before too long, we're going to try to win that game. And if that fella goes 2 or he goes 5, we'll dictate how we use our players. But we're not going to just give guys work to give them work. The game will dictate how we use the pitching staff.
And on the 3-man taxi squad, if you're on a road trip and something happens, can you bring a different guy? Like you have to put a player on the injured list. Can you bring another guy up to replace the 3-man, the vacancy on the 3-man squad?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that you can. You can always have 3 guys there every game, and I think if you need to fill a spot on the roster, he doesn't have to come from that 3-man taxi squad. You can bring a guy from that satellite group to, onto the active roster. Those 3 guys are there just in case there's some. If a guy from the satellite group can't get to a certain location via, something happens in the middle of the night and you got a day game the next day, you have those 3 guys who are there, right, to easily transition onto the roster. If we're somewhere and something happens at a critical time, you have to make a roster move. A lot of times that satellite player might not be able to get there by game time. So this allows you the opportunity to easily get a guy onto the roster. I think that's the philosophy behind that 3-man traveling group with the team.
One final thing on that. Can you change the members of the 3-man during a road trip or only at just to alternate them or only at the start of the trip?
I'm not sure exactly how that works, but I would assume you can. I'm not sure.
Well, if you don't know, I don't know. Thanks, buddy.
Yes. I'll find
Thomas,
out,
go
though.
ahead.
That's a Zach Rosenthal question, I think, primarily. And they're probably still maybe working through that as well.
Thanks, man.
You got it.
Thomas?
Buddy, from just watching from up top, it looked like John Gray was pretty nasty yesterday. I saw him break a Trevor Story bat, the way he worked Dahl. Am I reading too much into pitchers being ahead of hitters, or was there something that I saw that was pretty special out there from him?
John threw well. Yeah, I mean, we commented on how John threw. And we've seen that, over the last month. He was down in Arizona. Darryl Scott was down there. Darryl saw him a number of times. John threw the ball well. So I would say right now you could probably, today the 7th, of July, that you could make a case that the hitters are maybe a touch behind the the pitchers because they haven't faced any live pitching. They haven't been able to get in the box against a big league arm, getting ready for a season. So, and we're going to try to, obviously expedite that. The players want that. So, you'll see more of what you saw yesterday moving forward as far as, I think somebody asked me yesterday about, simulated games and inter-squad games. And, that was a little bit of that yesterday. You'll see a little bit of that today. You'll see a little bit more of that tomorrow, and then onward from there. So, yeah, it takes, it's tough to get out of bed and hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. And that's sort of what happened yesterday.
Yeah, what about any other pitchers that you look at, and obviously keeping that into account, kind of like John, you said, wow, this stuff is really nice right now.
It's awful, but like I said, I've been encouraged by how the guys have coming into camp, how their arms are, the work they did, over the last couple months. Everybody stayed on point, position players and pitchers. And again, I commend our entire pitching organization, our minor league coaches, our big league coaches, Mark Wiley, Zach Wilson, the number of Zoom calls that we've all had. Doug Chatwick has been a part of this too. Our mental skills coach. There's just been a lot of people who've been active with our players to keep them in the right spot. And I commend, all those guys and the players. So I think we all knew that, this was gonna be shortened, and guys have stayed ready. It's been really awesome.
Okay, a couple of just housekeeping things. When do you get rid of the L screen and put fielders out there behind the pitchers? And the question would be, have you added to that satellite group that the guys who will meet the satellite group?
We have not added to it. I think that the final formation of that is still in the works. And Thomas, if you come out tomorrow, maybe as early as tomorrow afternoon, you might not see an L screen.
Okay. And fielders behind the guys, will that be at that stage?
Yes, there could be some. You might not have 8 behind them or 7, but there'll be some fielders out there working, maybe at their position.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Patrick Saunders, and then Nick Groke will be with the final question. We'll be done.
Buddy, I wanted to get your reaction to something one of your players said, and I believe it was Trevor Story. He said the way the team is looking at this unique situation is the team that stays the healthiest, or the teams that stay the healthiest, and he was talking about the pandemic, might be the teams that win. What do you think of that? Is that something you guys have preached from the top, or is that just Trevor saying, listen, there's a reason why we want to be strict with our protocols?
I've heard that, throughout this whole last couple of weeks from other, inside the game, other players. But it's something that we talked about day one or prior to day one. And the players were extremely passionate about that. Trevor leading the way with Nolan, Doogie, other players, and I think organizationally, it's been a main theme. So, and I think there's something to that for sure, and we're gonna stay diligent on that. And I think I said it the first day, and I said it to our group. Just the individual commitment to this, to doing the right things, is very important.
Thank you.
Nick Groke, final question.
Yeah, buddy, just a quick clarification, because I think I crossed myself up. Who is not in camp who expects to be? It's Hyro, Elias, Charlie.
They're in Denver. They're here. They're approaching camp. They're not on the field yet. Charlie's in Atlanta.
There's not a 4th. Is there a 4th?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. And was Santos ever was Santos ever not here? Did I get his name wrong? Was he waiting at one point?
Yeah, I think there was a number of guys that in transition from the Dominican that were tested a little, I mean, not tested, had some challenges on flights and getting out of their hometowns and those types of things.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
All right,
guys.
thank you,
Thanks.
buddy.